Sam, this is quite an interview we're having with this guy, Burrus. He's brilliant, huh? I mean, who is this guy? He's outrageous. He reminds me of you.
I wish he reminded me of me. Yeah, Daniel Burrus is an extraordinary individual. New York Times rated him one of the top 3 business gurus, if you can believe that.
That's amazing. You know, one of the things that's really great is that when we put really fine guests on this show, then we get really great listeners. And great listeners like what we have to say and like what we explore. So what is it that you're up to? Where should we send the listeners if they're interested in learning more about Sam Morris, for instance?
If you want to check out more about me, you can go to ZenWarriorTraining.com and find out more about me there. Or you can follow me everywhere that Sam Morris and Zen Warrior Training appear together.
That's sweet, Sam. I love it. Well, in the meantime, let's get back to this Burrus guy. It sure has been fun. Sam Morris at ZenWarriorTraining.com, is that it?
ZenWarriorTraining.com is the website, and then at Zen Warrior Training is my Instagram handle. Yeah, just put those words in a thing.
Well, cool, Sam. Thanks for sharing.
Google those words. You'll find
All right. Let's get back to this talk. That was fun. Thanks, Sam. Did you hear what he just said, Sam?
I know. He said
us
no
full
holds barred.
reins.
He
gave us full reins to come after him.
I gave you range. You can come after me. I don't care. It's all good.
Oh, look at this guy. Like, very few people.
That's ballsy.
Few people have said that, but they're dead now.
But, you know, he's got the kind of credibility and authority that allows for him to do that. And I think he'll come at us no holds barred, too. So let's just let that be an open invitation.
Well, you know, I got a feeling that we're going to come together helping those that are listening. So I got a feeling it's more of that. But we'll see what happens.
Okay, let's just see what happens. Yeah, I'm kind of spent for the day, so I'm going to leave it up to you guys. If you don't mind, I'll just host a thing. I got to sit back. Maybe I'll smoke a cigar. I'm really curious what you two come up with.
I get it. I was doing something in Europe early this morning, and last night I was doing something in Asia late at night. So I get the spent idea for sure.
Yeah. Well, here's what we got. We got this podcast, and this is like, Daniel, welcome to the podcast. But what we got, and we'll do a formal introduction, I think Sam can do that for us, is the following phenomena that I think we got to hop over before we even get started, which is this podcast is still just on this side of being post-produced. This whole podcast, this Insanity podcast. And you're either number 14 or 15, a very relatively high-powered conversations that we've had, not to be culminated in any way by, or to be culminated anyways by who we're about to be with today. And there's an opportunity to really deliver on the edge of sanity and insanity, which was the basis of creating this particular podcast format. I'm going to leave the ball to my good friend Sam here to talk a little bit about what that format really was designed to do, what we've done up until now with the first 14 or 15 right prior to them dropping. And then who you are to him, or how we ended up with you, allowing us to shred you over the next hour and a half. And I really, really appreciate the opportunity to do so, because I have that kind of aggression still pent up in me on this late part of the week. And so shredding people is usually the way I take care of that. And to this week is no different. So Sam, what do we got?
Well, that's quite a lead in. Absolutely. Just to speak to what you were just saying, Fred, finding the fine line between sanity and insanity is really our intention here. And when I think about the guest that we have today, Daniel Burrus, I think, how dare he find so much sanity in this insane world? I mean, he seems to be actually making sense of what's going on in a way that is rare and displays a unique genius. So I'm really curious to hear how Daniel has been doing this not only recently, but for many decades, starting in the early 80s. And I'm going to just go ahead and read Daniel's bio. We normally don't do official bio readings because we are so damn casual.
You don't need to do that at all. Whatever, pick and choose whatever you want.
With you, you've got an impressive enough bio that I want to make sure I don't miss anything. So I'm just going to go ahead.
Really, Daniel, only one of us knows how to read, so I just leave this up to Sam to take over. So that's one of the reasons we don't do it, is because I don't know how to do it. So it's just like,
Okay, so here we go. Daniel Burrus is considered one of the world's leading futurists on global trends and disruptive innovation. He is a strategic advisor to executives from Fortune 500 companies, using his anticipatory business model to develop game-changing strategies based on his proven methodologies for capitalizing on technology innovations and their future impact. He is the author of 7 books, including the New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestseller Flash Foresight, and his latest best-selling book, The Anticipatory Organization. And he is a syndicated writer with millions of monthly readers on the topics of technology-driven trends, disruptive innovation, and exponential change. Burrus is an innovative entrepreneur who has founded 6 businesses, 4 of which were U.S. national leaders in their first year. New York Times has referred to him as one of the top 3 business gurus in the highest demand as a speaker. So basically, just some kind of loser who failed out of high school, I guess. Is that what we're talking about here, Fred?
Well, I don't know. Failing out of high school, it looks like is actually, I wouldn't be surprised if that is in Mr. Burrus's past. Because
that's true.
In some ways, deciding early on that conventional education wasn't going to serve you up in a way to create Daniel Burrus, at some point, in order to just catapult over the top of what the steady, status quo of what intelligence allows for, one has to give up that which was served up to us on a platter, that called, conventional education, and just assume that we're learning everything we need to know by sitting in class or, taking tests and all that. But that sounds to me like Daniel gave that up very early. And I wouldn't be surprised if that was in high school when he finally started saying that this shit doesn't work anymore. So I need to find out a new way to look at the world. But I am really curious as to the genesis of where this type of thinking might have got its roots. Can you look back at yourself and tell us how and when did that occur?
Well, I think there are a lot of epiphanies that occurred over time. I mean, growing up, my dad was an engineer. And when I was a little kid, asking him, why the sunset was a different color than at noon, if I looked at the sky, he actually didn't know how to talk to little kids. So he gave me the scientific answers. So I had to kind of rise up. And because I think we under-answer kids, we assume the wrong things. They're far more malleable and shapeable than we realize, and they could absorb far more. So we tend to talk down to them because we think they're little kids. He didn't know how to talk to little kids. So he did what he would do. And it was caused me to rise up. And I know that my mother, as I was growing up, she always wanted me to be observant. In other words, when I remember the little kid, I'd be coming home from school and she'd say, what was the color of the last 3 cars that passed on your walk? Or, what kind of bird did you see? And, she would ask me these questions that I had to, in other words, I had to learn how to be a multisensory observer.
Or because she would ask me. You could have just lied about the answers. That's what I would have done with my mom. I would just said, those things kind of get you in the end, Oh, okay.
So,
maybe that's somehow. That could be
but I think, like you said, though, I realized actually very young that I was bored. I was bored in school, and I was bored throughout school. As a matter of fact, I started out teaching biology and physics, and that's the opposite in a way, because if someone would have told me when I was in high school or my first year in college that I would end up really enjoying teaching, I would say, well, you're crazy. I mean, why would I want to be the enemy? Why would I want to be the last thing that I would want to be? Although once I started realizing that I knew what would have excited me, and I think what would have excited me might excite a lot of other people. Maybe there's another way to do it. Maybe there's a better way to do it. And that kind of opened the door for me to imagine a future that I didn't even want to think about. And that is, teaching. And what I discovered early, thank goodness, was, the 2 most important moments in a human's life is the day you're born and the day you find out you were born. And I did find out I was put on the planet to teach. And I got an Educator of the Year award my first year. I did really well, but I was also entrepreneurial. And I had an idea for a business, in this case, an airplane design. I built it. I test flew it. I ended up with 37 national locations in the first year. Turned out it flew rather well. And then I started another company, another one. Obviously, I left teaching, but I looked into my future, and I started doing that when I was young. I looked way out to being in my late 90s, thinking to myself, if this is how I lived my professional life, starting these companies and doing all this, am I happy? And the answer was, well, no. So I knew right away I had to sell them all. And instead of waiting for years trying to sell them for more money, I believe in moving on quickly. So I sold them very quickly for less money so that I didn't have them in my way of whatever was next. because I don't want barriers in my way. It was kind of like the barrier to starting my first business, since I knew nothing of business, nothing. Never had a business course, which, by the way, helped me tremendously.
Yeah,
but anyway, since I knew nothing of business, fear of failure is a fear. And I was leaving something education. I was successful in to try something I knew nothing about. But what really helped me was I got more than one fear. Let's get all my fears out. So I started dishing them all out. And once I could see all of my fears, and man, I had a lot of them. I didn't even know there were that many fears. I put them all out there, and I found that for me, and this is only speaking to Dan here now, not anyone else, but for me, the fear of regret was much bigger than the fear of failure. And because I'd rather be an old guy that had failed than an old guy that had wished he had tried and never did. At least I'd have some stories of the failure, and let's face it, I could always go back and teach. So that gave me the power and the courage to go past failure. And so actually failure helped me move forward. It was the correct failure. And I think a pivotal time, and I won't get into too much about me because I want you to ask more questions, but there were certain key points. And one key point for me was, I remember this when I was a very young kid. I was down in Texas meeting a great grandfather just before he passed away. He was like 99 years old. I can't remember his face. All I can see is the back of him sitting at the edge of a bed, kind of hunched over. I don't even remember any words he said, but I do remember what I thought when I met him. And what I thought to myself, and I probably was I think I was in about first or second grade. I was very young. And I remember thinking to myself, because here he's so old. And by the way, they also told me that he was an 8-year-old drummer boy in the Civil War. And that really impressed me because as a little kid, I still knew about cowboys and Indians in the Civil War. And I thought, wow. And if you do the math, it works. So anyway, here I'm meeting somebody who was a drummer boy in the Civil War. Here's what came to my mind when I was a little kid. And it was a big one. And that is, I wonder if he's explored and learned all the things that are inside of him. I wonder if he's really tapped into all that he is. And I thought, I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, again, I'm giving you a little kid thinking, and I thought, well, I wonder if anybody does. And I thought to myself, I don't want to be like that. I want to find out what's all inside of me. If I really discovered all that's inside, maybe I'd have some really interesting things to say if some little kid came up to talk to me when I'm 99 years old and sitting on the edge of a bed. Maybe I'd have something good to say. And because I don't think there was a lot to say, that's why I don't remember it. So that was kind of a pivotal point. And I remember when I was talking to Sam on a phone call, getting to know Sam, who was an amazing guy. So glad I got to know Sam and getting to know Sam. I told him that it took me until age 23 to come up with a way to make that happen. So at age 23, I remembered that and I thought I need a system. Otherwise, I won't tap into all that I am. So I decided to make a commitment to myself, and I'm doing that today and every year. I decided to learn one new thing and really get into it. Now, again, it wasn't to be world class. It was because I wanted to learn it. And I thought one is doable, 2 or 3 maybe aren't. So 1 year I learned how to hang glide. 1 year I learned how to do ballroom dancing. 1 year I learned how to do fancy dives off a diving board. 1 year I learned how to make films. 1 year I got into photography. 1 year I got into scuba diving. Well, that was decades and decades and decades and decades and decades ago. I've got a wide palette of experiences that help me do what I do. And something for those that are young out there listening, and maybe those that aren't so young, to consider. 1 a year is doable. Most of us do 1 or 2 a lifetime.
Sam, I've been looking while this man's been talking for places that I could take jabs at his solar plexus or something, like how I do, like sometimes just kind of leave him imbalanced and stuff, like at least a little bit, wonder what the heck, how did he come up with that? And I have no footholds here. This is a man who's pretty complete in how he presents himself.
Absolutely not.
Let me give you some more footholds. Let me try to give you some footholds. All right.
Go for it. Yeah.
So, because good jabs are good. So, because the good thing about jabs is that you allow someone to get deeper into themselves and reveal things that are really worth revealing. So I like that. So I'm not afraid and I want you to jab. So let me give you some more things to think about. And back before the pandemic, I was giving a commencement speech and the people getting various degrees, big audience. And I started out.
What university were you
in Wisconsin.
And I was starting Madison, Madtown.
So I decided to freak them all out. I did freak them all out in the beginning because I said, I don't want you to focus on living a successful life. And then I paused for a second to let that sink in. I'm sure that was the point they thought, why did we let this guy talk? And I said, the reason I don't want you to live a successful life is because success is all about you. It's all about your degrees, how many plaques you have on the wall. It's about how much money you make. It's about how big your house is, how cool your car is. And if you're a business, it's about your growth rate and all of that you're doing. That's success. What I'd like you to do instead is to live a life of significance, because significance is about what you do for others. And when you elevate your ability to do things for others every year, you'll find yourself being far more successful. In other words, success is not the goal, it is the result of significance. So I gave them that to chew on, and I try to do that myself wherever I can. And the second thing I said is, I know as a graduate right now, regardless of your degree, you're thinking really big about your future. You got some big thoughts. And I remember when I was getting my degrees, I was thinking the same thing. I had big ideas. But I want you to actually realize you're thinking way too small. Because when I got my last degree, I was thinking big, and I look back now and think, oh my God, was I thinking small? Holy cow, I was thinking way too small. Well, here's the point. I'm thinking too small right now. We all are. You are thinking too small about what you can do, what is possible now, and more importantly, in the future, since that's where you're going to spend the rest of your life. Maybe we should think about this. So we got to be thinking about the bigger big. To see the bigger big and do the bigger big, you can't start from the bottom. You've got to define the big first. So when I turned 30, I was in Glacier National Park, and I woke up in Many Glacier, and I looked up and I thought, I got to climb a mountain today. And I was with a couple of buddies. And so I looked at the top. In other words, I looked at my big goal, the top of the mountain. And I didn't have ropes or anything, so I had to find a way to get up there without going, up a cliff. So I started at the ideal, because I believe in planning backwards. In other words, think of the ideal future, emphasis on ideal, and then plan back towards the present, because you can get more vague now that you've got a direction. And I could see my goal, and I could see, there's a route I could take. And as I started to look at my path from the ideal goal down towards where my feet were, the present, I already knew the direction, so I could just start walking. And as I got about halfway up the mountain, I found out there was another top. I couldn't see the top from the bottom. There was another peak. That isn't where I wanted to go. My ideal goal wasn't my ideal goal. It's just what I thought was my ideal goal. But I didn't know what the ideal goal was until I got high enough to see the ideal goal. You see, what happens is we come up with a plan, a personal plan, a business plan, whatever it might be, and we think big about it, and we start executing it. And we just keep executing and executing, which takes a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of lifetime sometimes. But it's important for us, I believe, before we get too caught up, once we define the big, we should stop ourselves and say, all right, what is the far bigger big? With an eye on significance over success. And you will find that you will soar.
All right. There's a lot. All right. There's a lot there to unpack. So your model, as I understand it, is really about identifying trends and certainties within industries and then predicting a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades out where that industry will be, and then sort of reverse engineering that probability so that you can look at what that business or where that trend is going and help that business to understand where they can apply their efforts right now. That's very left brain linear thinking that is based on taking in data and analyzing the data and analyzing the trends. But there's this whole other component that you're speaking to now, and I've heard you speak to this before, which is really, you've spoken about needing to align at a level of the conscious, the subconscious, and the superconscious simultaneously. So, absolutely. So I'm hearing things that might sound like disparate or different approaches that are combined, that you're combining those approaches. And I'd love to hear you speak to that, because one is very left brain, just looking purely at data. And then another is really almost what I might define as a spiritual kind of approach. So how do those two different sort of, I wouldn't call them disciplines necessarily, but those two different aspects of the whole come together and in your imagination and in your thinking? And is this something that you can teach?
Yeah. Well, first of all, no wonder you've got a great podcast going, because you really ask great questions, and you want to get really good answers. You have to ask really good questions. So thank you for that. And the reality is, both of those things that seem so separate, so different, so disconnected, in my mind, they're the same thing.
Yeah.
They're the exact same thing, because first of all, as I've gotten older and as I've traveled around, I've been fortunate enough and blessed enough to travel around the world helping people. It's amazing how many places I've been. I realize it's all about mindset. So much of it is about our mindset. I mean, is it a scarcity or is it an abundance mindset? And one of the things, one of my first concepts that I started when I gave my first speech was to a large inner city junior high school group of about 1,000 kids. We can talk about that later if you'd like. But what I did is I started sharing the future view concept. And future view, here's the way I would describe it. How our kids, how we view the future to a great extent shapes how we act in the present. I mean, today, during the day, there were people who were buying Apple computer. There were people who were selling Apple computer. What's the difference? Their view of Apple. Some kids were deciding to go to college and some kids were deciding to go to drugs. What's their difference? Well, it's a future view issue. And some people would start a company right now. Some people would never start a company right now. What are you, crazy? What is it? Well, it's a future view issue. So here's the principle. How you view the future shapes how you act in the present, and how you act in the present shapes your future. In other words, your future view determines the future you. And what I believe is that most of us are undershooting. Our future view is based not on a windshield view, but a rear view mirror view of where we're going. But it's more related to where we've been and the baggage we carry with us. And we also have technology that is allowing us to do things that were impossible just a year or two ago, turning the impossible into the possible if we think the bigger big. So the key is to elevate people's, of all ages, everybody's future view. Because if I can elevate their future view, we'll have a better future. We'll all have a better future. But I can't do it with just spiritualism, and I can't do it with just mindsight. I've got to do it with some concrete. This is not just motivational, inspirational, zip, boom, ba, rah, 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 because it won't stick. I need things that will stick. So I have to ground it with things that are what I would call undeniable truths. And when you hear an undeniable truth, you don't need a PDF that's 20 pages long to prove it to you. When you hear it, you know it. So I have to take people on a journey, whether it is through writing, whether it's through speaking, whether it's through whatever medium it might be. You're taking them on a journey. And really what I'm doing is changing how people think without telling them what to think. You see, I don't have the right to tell anyone what to think. Besides, why would I try? However, I can change how you think about your future. I can change how you think about possibilities. I can change how you think about your problems. I can change how you think about technology and whether it's good or evil. I can change how you think about a whole bunch of things, but I can't tell you what to think. So I'm in the business of changing how people think, and I need to be armed with left and right brain tools that I can bring together in a synergistic way that all of a sudden create forward motion. And one of the most powerful ways of getting that to happen, we live in so much uncertainty, is to help them to find a grounding in certainty. Because when you're uncertain, you don't move forward. When you're uncertain, you don't write big checks. When you're uncertain, you don't say yes. When you're uncertain, you say, well, I like that, but I need another opinion. You don't make bold moves. You don't try something you've never tried before. But when you're certain, you have the confidence to make a bold move. So that certainty is powerful. And one of the ways, again, now I'm going to blend left and right brain here a little bit. One of the ways to help people find certainty and that confidence is by looking at trends. Because most of us don't look at trends very much. because some happen and some don't. I mean, there's no end to the list of trends. They're out there all the time. By the way, it's easy to predict. When are we going to get another big list of trends? Probably in December for 2022. I mean, everybody publishes their new trends list. By the way, fully predictable. When you realize how predictable things are, it's unbelievable. So I want to help people see the predictability of a seemingly unpredictable situation and find confidence in the certainty and the predictability of what seems to be completely unpredictable. So just to give our listeners and all of our viewers and everyone just a little more thinking about that, and I'm going to pull a few minutes of the educator in me out to use this as a teaching moment, if I may, because first of all, I can't help myself. I'm sorry, but I need to empower when I'm here.
Please do.
Okay, thanks.
That's why we're here.
Okay,
normally,
good.
when I'm in a course of this level back in college, it's usually after like smoking a half a joint or something outside before I went in. So I wish I would have.
You
been
only would smoke a half a joint? Come on, give me a break.
We had some good weed. We had some good weed in Ann Arbor.
All right, I agree. Okay, all right. I'm with you now. Okay, so with the idea of let's talk about predictability. I remember meeting so many CEOs over the years and high-level people of Fortune 2 companies that they would know I'm a futurist, and they would quickly say, well, of course, no one can predict the future and be right. And I remember saying that to a head of GM, a CEO of GM, and I remember saying to him, well, let's see, it's fall, next will be winter. Hey, I think I'll be right, because I gave him a certainty. And let's face it, we know that there are over 500 known cycles that repeat over and over again. There's biological cycles. We know that there are life cycles. We know there are business cycles. By the way, there's sales cycles. By the way, if I know a sales cycle, I like to have the sale completed before the cycle begins. Why? Because I'll use a cycle to my advantage. That's why we have cycles. Can an astronomer in the year 2035 in March tell you the exact moment we'll have a full moon? Yeah, they can nail it. Don't tell me the future is unpredictable. And when stocks are going up, will they go up forever? No, they're going to go down. By the way, will they go down forever? No, they're going to go back up. It's cyclical. Warren Buffett buys when all of you are selling. He sells when all of you are buying because he understands psychology. So there's cyclical changes. And once people start to buy into, okay, all right, I'm buying in now. There's more than just death and taxes that you can predict. Okay, all right. Now I've kind of got them. And then I talk about the other kind of change that's not cyclical, that used to be so slow, no one ever tracked it, but now it's happening and changing our world on us like this. And I would call it linear in that it's not a cycle, but it's linear / exponential. 2 becomes 4 becomes 8. So it's one way, but it's growing extremely, really fast at an exponential level. So once people in China park their bicycle and they get a car, are they going back to the bike? Well, probably no. Once people in India get refrigeration for their home, are they going to say, we don't need refrigeration? Well, probably not. And baby boomers aren't going to all of a sudden get young. So there are so many things that we can see that are not going cyclical, but actually are heading in a direction that is far predictable. Let me give you a few technology examples. We had 3G. We had 4G. We now have 5G. Well, is that it? No. As a matter of fact, any listener right now could even give us what they'll call the next one, 6G, followed by 7. And could you even say exactly when it's coming out? Well, if you look, I've been doing this for 38 years. So if you go back to the thousands of articles or the 7 books, you'll see me predicting when 2G, 3G, 4G, all of those 5G were coming out and how powerful they would be and what things we could do with them. Accurately. Why? Because it's on a curve. You can track it. You can just see it. So I think once people start seeing that there are what I call all trends can be divided into 2 different categories. One is a hard trend, which is based on a future fact that cannot be changed. Good. Sounds like certainty to me. The other kind of trend is based on an assumption that may or may not happen. And by the way, there's a couple of different types of assumptions. I call them soft assumptions. That's based on your past experience, but it's soft because it may no longer be valid. A hard assumption is one that you at least tested to see if it's got more validity. But it's not represent a future fact. It's not a certainty. But it has less risk than a soft assumption that's just based on your gut intuition that you did not verify. So there's soft trends and hard trends. Now, so there's two things I'm teaching right now that I'd like everyone to think about. If you're just talking about a trend, who cares? Is it a hard trend, future fact that we know will happen, or is it a soft trend based on an assumption that might happen? And then the second big thing I want to teach right now is a trend by itself, who cares? It's academic until you tie an opportunity for you into it. And the minute you attach an opportunity, it bursts into actionable life. So what is the opportunity of a hard trend? Well, a opportunity of a hard trend is you can see problems before you have them. How many people have said, well, I knew that would happen. Well, then why did you let it? Because you didn't have the confidence that it would for sure happen. But when you are working in hard trends, you can see, well, I know that's going to happen. Well, good. Then I'd like you to pre-solve it. And by the way, I call this being anticipatory versus being reactionary. And frankly, if we as human beings on this planet continue to just be agile and react quickly to problems after they occur, we will not be happy campers on planet Earth, not a single one of us. We're going to have to start learning how to accurately anticipate and pre-solve those problems so that we don't have them in the first place, which, by the way, is fully doable. There is a way to learn how to do that. So hard trends let you predict problems before they happen and then pre-solve them so you don't have them in the first place. It also lets you see and accurately predict disruptions before they disrupt so that now you have disruption as a choice. In my 1993 book, Technotrends, which was, I'm happy and joyous to say, it was a bestseller even in China back in 93, you can see me talking about smartphones and social media and all the things we're doing today that were back then with time frames on them. And it isn't because I'm just a smart guy. I got a methodology. You can do this too. By the way, if only I could do it, I wouldn't bother being on this show talking about this. But you can. And by the way, I'm saying you must. I would actually like every listener to become what I call a positive disruptor. Let me back up on that word, because I'm using it on purpose. Disruption we think of as negative. Why? Because it happens to us. Now we got to change. People don't like change. Now I got to do something different. Hell. Now whatever my cash cow was is no good anymore. Now I have to work, and before I could have coasted. But what I'm really getting at is, does Jeff Bezos, CEO of Amazon, founder, does he see disruption as negative? No, it's all the people he's disrupting that see it as negative. Well, you can do that. Why? Because everything sucks, and I love it. Let me just say that again. Everything sucks, and I love it. You mean this is the best kind of connection we could have? You mean this is the best kind of seat that you're currently sitting on? I don't care what kind of seat you've got. You got earphones on. Are those the most comfortable earphones that could ever be made? You got a guitar in the background. Is that the absolute coolest guitar that could ever be created by a human being? And I could go on. And as a matter of fact, nothing is perfect because perfection is impossible. Thank God the future needs us all because nothing is perfect. Everything sucks. Great. I love it. And now we have new tools to make everything far better. So what I want people to do is to be, and I'll put it in a phrase here, positive disruptors, creating the transformations that need to happen to increase relevancy and build a better tomorrow for all of us.
You're speaking to a topic that my friend Jay Sammet speaks to, which is really about disrupting one's own thinking in order to disrupt industries, entire industries. It starts with, can you disrupt yourself first? How much are you disrupting your own thinking? And because you can't disrupt an industry unless you're disrupting your own thinking. And so there's a big handicap that human beings have in this area, and that is that we tend to gravitate towards what's familiar, and we tend to default towards what's comfortable. And it is very challenging to move in the direction of discomfort. And yet there's a certain level of discomfort that's required in order to actually think disruptively, in order to be in this. So can you speak to that?
Yeah. Well, perfect setup, because I believe that the key is you have to help people find discomfort in their comfort.
There you go.
They have to find discomfort in their comfort, or they will not move. They will not change. They have to realize, because everybody would say, no, I don't want to do that. No. But if no actually has greater risk in time or whatever it is than a yes, you're better off with a yes. In other words, you want to make sure that if I'm trying to convince you of something, to try something, of course, you would talk about why you might want to try it. But then, by the way, let's talk about what if you don't try it. Let's talk about the no for a minute. So that and I would like you to dimensionalize it, because most of us are two-dimensional thinkers, which limits us. But we need to be 3- and 4-dimensional thinkers so that we can see all the elements rather than just a few. I mean, it's kind of like flying. We're not just driving and turning left and right and putting on a brake. We can go up and down and do all sorts of different things. Well, there's many dimensions to all concepts and to life. And, it's not in a flat plane. So to do that, I also use soft trends to help make that work. And we haven't talked much about that. So let me get to the soft trend part. I love soft trends. Oh my God, I love soft trends. By the way, I love hard trends. Oh, gee, I love them both. What I love about a soft trend, unlike a hard trend, is if you don't like it, you can change it. It's an assumption about the future. If you don't like it, you can change it. Take a look at healthcare costs in the United States. They've been going up and up and up for a long time. A long time. By the way, that's a trend. They're going up. And so far, most of healthcare reform has been around how do we pay for the mess as the baby boomers get older? Because we know they're getting older and it's more expensive and, oh my God, what are we going to do? Instead of realizing that, oh no, rising healthcare costs is a total soft trend. Don't like it, you can change it. And there just so happens to be amazing new tools that we could do to use, like blockchain and others, to bring transparency to a system that has no transparency, at least in the United States. For example, you maybe didn't know that the aspirin in your hospital costs $24. That's what you're paying for it. Well, if you knew that, you'd have your spouse bring it. If you knew that that knee replacement you're having put in could vary by 158% in the same network, you would say, well, I want the one that's less since it's the same exact knee made by the same exact person in the same exact size. So we have no transparency. So if we use, for example, blockchain, and there, by the way, is a blockchain for healthcare that's got $100 million in early round funding to do just that, to bring increasing trust and transparency, you're going to have more competition. You will lower prices. I could go on healthcare and that. But, again, it sucks. Good. Education. Oh, man, it needs to be totally disrupted. Good. Yeah, it sucks. Sure. And by the way, do I say that it sucks because educators have been doing something wrong? No, then they will become your enemy. So it's no one has done anything wrong. What's happened is the world changed and there's some new, bigger rights to do. It's kind of like the CEO I was talking to that said to his people, we need to get better at. And then he started telling us as a CEO what his executive team needed to get better at. What did he just really tell them? You're not that good. He just put them on the defensive. He just said we need to get better at, which is a complaint. One word would have fixed the whole thing. One word fixes everything. And that is, we need to get even better at. I took all the baggage away just by adding the word even. See, I believe that we undermine positive change and positive transformation by usually just one or two words that we don't even think about unless we thought about them. And I'm trying to bring this to everyone's consciousness, so that you can make the positive change happen. It's kind of like when I first met with the Joint Chiefs at the Pentagon. And when I was talking to them, and after talking to them a little bit, one of the high-level generals, that had probably a shoulder problem because he had so many medals on one side. But anyway, he said, we got to change the culture. And I said, I don't think the Marines are going to like that. See, when you want to change, we got to change teachers. We got to change fill in the blank. We got to change doctors. We got to change nurses. Right away, they're becoming your enemy because we're telling them they're doing something wrong. What I said to him is, no, I think a better thing would be is to elevate the culture to increasing relevancy based on the direction the future is going. By the way, who's going to argue with that? See, I took away the baggage. The key is now I'm using a mixture of right brain and left brain. You can see what I'm doing? I'm using a combination of things. So I've got hard trends and soft trends. I can talk about technology. I can talk about demographics. I can talk about regulations. And now it's really good for those that especially want that side. But we all have a little bit of both sides. And we have to feel confident beyond just the emotional side. So again, it's that blend. So I love soft trends. Why? I want to change them. Your sales have been going down because of the pandemic. Well, you could continue to write them down, or you could implement some strategies that would cause you to start growing. You could do one or the other. You have choices. So again, I'm about creating positive changes and not letting people get stuck. And if I could, Dr. Fred, one more little comment I want to make, because I know you were about to ask something, but let me throw one more quick little thing because it jives in with what I'm talking about. There's all these new things we got to learn and do. And what people do is they grab all those things and they get overwhelmed and they got no time. They have no time to learn and to grow, and they just can't do it. So I would like you to think of it as, think of an old Tarzan movie. Everybody's seen Tarzan swinging from vine to vine in the jungle. And of course, he doesn't run on the jungle floor because he can't move that fast. There's a lot of brush, there's snakes, there's lions, a lot of hazards. So he goes from vine to vine. And when Tarzan grabs the vine in front of him, what happens if he doesn't let go of the vine he was just holding on to? Boom, boom. Forward motion stops. The key isn't what you're grabbing onto, that new shiny new object, that new thing. The really important, because there's lots of new things to grab onto. Here's what I'd like people to think about. What are you letting go of? Because if you don't let go, you'll be like Tarzan, stuck, holding on to the old vine and the new vine and not going anywhere. And I think a lot of us right now are stuck, are just stuck. And you're not stuck because of somebody else. If you want to know the source of all of your problems, all you got to do is look in the mirror, because you're in more control of you and your future than you realize. Time to take control, eliminate the baggage, get unstuck. All right, now, fire away.
All right. Really, there's a whole course that you've taught us or that you're bringing forth here that it's like, oh, yeah, I can follow that. I'm with you. I'm next to you. I agree with you. What you say is true, or what you say. And what my point here is something about me noticing this right, wrong, true, false, bad, good, this binary way of linearly thinking, at least when I have to use words to define my thoughts. Like there's, if I have to actually use my voice to describe my thoughts, I'm forced to be binary and linear in my thinking process in order to string along a sentence leading to a paragraph or an idea or a thought, let alone an actionable event. So one of the things I'm really noticing as I watch you carefully, with truly looking to shred you and not being able to quite yet, I do notice that there's an opportunity to look that you really are a binary thinker. You are an extraordinary binary thinker who, by doing it everywhere, looks multidimensional. For instance, there's so much A and B here. There's so much left and right. There's so much self and other. There's so much certainty and uncertainty, past and future, trends and, random, comfort and disruption, or significance versus successful, or that wrong versus right, or there's the soft trends and hard trends, the 5D and 3D, there's and then you sort where your magic is in your realization that we are stuck this is what I at least surmise at this point, that your realization that we are really A or B in all situations. And although A looks like the more familiar choice given the context of whatever we're experiencing, we could literally choose B, and B has a different outcome and a different set of possibilities associated with it. And that you kind of create a necklace of thoughts and ideas that are so unique because each and every opportunity that we might habitually pick, the more limiting, but yet the more familiar choice of A versus B, you seemingly have at least the courage and experience to consider that the other one is not only possible, but if used properly in that particular occasion, could lead to an outcome that is far beyond, far more successful, for instance, far more significant, far more of a direct contribution to the world by just simply seeing that it doesn't have to go the way that we thought it had to go. On the one hand, I'm like, man, this man's a freak who's all over the space looking at non-binary ways of thinking. But in fact, you're as entrapped as all of us are in thinking yes or no, right or wrong, true or false, good or bad, and all of those things. And what's here for you is some ways, it seems to me, and help me if this is an experience that resonates with you, a willingness, almost a surrender to consider the possibility that the other is also real, that the opposite is also available in any given decision cascade.
I love that.
And that really what you're here to do in your disruption is to consider a string of non-familiar possibilities so that I can live into a future and then reverse engineer how to get to that mountain by figuring out what the last step was that I took when I got to the top of the mountain, and continue to reverse engineer that back here, and then realize on my way up, I'm going to be faced with things that no longer have me necessarily attached to the original outcome. I need to, in fact, free myself of being attached to whatever I thought the original outcome was that I was pursuing. So, assuming that I'm somewhere in the same stratosphere as what you're talking about as you deliver on how to create futuristic thinking, there's this notion that we really do have all the tools, because we too are limited by our 3D binary thinking process. And if we were courageous enough, we could consider negative A or B as a possibility and then endorse that to create a new future. How does that land for you?
All right. Well, first of all, very insightful. And the approach that I take is to get people to see that there is a C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, Z, and beyond A and B. I have to get them to at least accept there's an A and a B. In other words, you got to walk before you run. So to be able to get to a more dimensional space, it's hard to grab them there and shoot them there first, when they're stuck in A and don't even really think there's a B and are maybe in denial of it, instead of embracing it and starting to realize, actually, there's a whole world. And by the way, there's an up and a down as well. So
let me see if I can add.
Binary is a pathway.
Yeah.
To more.
If there's a truth that flies in the face of a truth that I had as being undeniable, if there's a truth that flies in the face of what I thought was an undeniable truth, then the next outcome, the next way to think about that is, if there's one, then both of them are subject to the fact that there must be many. If there's two, there must be many.
Right. Back in my early teaching days, one of the first things that I did with students was I would show how easy it was to trick every one of their senses. Because as humans, we use our senses to make sense of the world. And every sense you have can be completely tricked. So starting out by showing that actually you can trick every one of your senses. So you have to have a little different antenna as you look. We need to bring up some new antennas, and by the way, leave them up. And in the discussion we've had,
that was like my favorite Martian. You're one of my guys. You know about my favorite Martian. It's been a long time since I've seen those antennas come up. But right there, that was reference to my favorite Martian, and I have.
You got it exactly. I haven't thought about that in a long time. Thank you for bringing back that memory. And so, in my learning systems and books and so on, hard and soft trends is a beginning point rather than the point. And I'll give you some examples. And I kind of smiled when you said something earlier, because I have a number of key areas that you get into. One of them is opposites work better. The law of opposites, I'll call it. Another one is how to take your biggest problem and skip it. I call it the skip it principle. And anyway, I've got a number of these different principles that allow you to move forward where you couldn't before, solve problems that you didn't know you had. But then again, you find out what you have. In other words, that's where more of the dimensionality comes in, because people say, oh, I love the skip it principle. Now, that has nothing to do with hard and soft trends, but it definitely has to do with your future, because you've got all these problems that you can't get past because you haven't learned how to skip them and move forward. So, in other words, there's more to it than hard and soft trends, which I'm agreeing with you. There's a couple of dimensions, but when you start looking at the other dimensions, all of a sudden you see that there's a lot of things flying around, including one in there that I'll just point out as another moment to share with people. And that is, I call it choosing to be extraordinary. And I did a study of extraordinary people as one of the self-studies that I like to do. I mean, I just assign these things to myself. And there are truly some extraordinary people that are kind of born that way. But in most cases, they aren't born that way. They didn't start out extraordinary. Mother Teresa wasn't a little amazing fourth grade extraordinary nun or future nun. So at some point, it's somewhere along the line, they stopped being ordinary and started becoming extraordinary. So I had a CEO ask me one time, he says, when I mentioned the phrase, he said, well, how do I hire extraordinary people? I want to do that. And I said, well, they already work for you. You just haven't given them a pathway to become extraordinary. And let me give you a quick example to use it again as a teaching moment because I can't help myself for all of us. And that is, let's say that you are going to give a presentation for a sales group or whatever. You're going to give a presentation and you've done this before and you're about to do what you've always done before. Stop yourself and ask yourself, what would a absolutely extraordinary presenter do that I'm not doing? And give that a little thought and you'll come up with some interesting new higher level ways of doing what you were just about to do. In other words, you're not going to do it in the same way. Let's say you're a student and you ask questions. Before you ask that question, stop yourself and ask, wait a minute. What would an extraordinary student ask? Let me ask that question instead and ask that question. So whatever we're about to do, and by the way, are you a fantastic husband, brother, wife, whatever, or are you extraordinary? Are you a significant father or just a successful one? Are you a significant business owner or just a successful one? Or how about an employee? Hey, let's throw it to you. I remember there was a little kid that grew up not far from me, and he was actually going to Madison, University of Wisconsin, getting an engineering degree. And he
is that where you live? Do you live in Madison now?
No, he's out and about.
Where do you live now? Do you live in Madison?
I've got two places. I'm in San Diego a good part of the year, and I actually started all of these 6 companies just outside of Milwaukee.
Outside of Milwaukee. Mm-hmm.
So I'm in the Milwaukee area too. So anyway, going back to...
Go Bucks. Go Bucks on top of that, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So just going back to the student. So he was in his junior year. He had required class, and he said, I can't take it. The teacher's too boring. I need this class, but I'm thinking of dropping out. I thought I'd call you before I dropped out. I just can't take it anymore. He's so boring. And he was serious. He said, he's a smart kid. So here's what I said to him. I said, his name was Ted. I said, Ted, why are you allowing the class to be boring? And he thought about that a little bit. And I said, well, that's not the teacher's fault. What could you do to make that not a boring class? I mean, you can't change the teacher, but you can change you and how you react to it. Well, he talked to me about a month and a half later. He called me back and said, it's the best class I've got. He said, I started asking better questions that the instructor perked up. The other students perked up. The class is one of my favorite classes now. And he said, the teachers changed. And I said, no, the teachers didn't change. You just elevated the conversation. And in boredom, so again, like I said earlier, what's the problem? Look in the mirror. Start there.
Daniel, I have a question for you that it's just burning. It's just burning. And I really, look, your level of brilliance and your capacity to deliver it in an articulate fashion that all of our listeners are likely going to be able to gain some important and useful wisdom and knowledge is extraordinary. Truly extraordinary. So there's that to be said. And I certainly could say that with each and every sentence you utter. And then there's this next space, which I think is at least sitting here with the curiosity of both. I'm going to go on a limb and actually assume that Sam has a curiosity along the same lines of what I'm saying here. So you speak of this multidimensionality, you speak of, altering one's reality or taking control of one's life and really creating, becoming responsible so that boredom is never out there. Actually, nothing's ever out there. It's all right here in the same mirror. Like I'm the one who frames my life as it occurs for me. Where do psychedelics fit in this whole world? And what about when a man like you thinks about what the common man is allowed to perceive, allowed to experience, allowed to ontologically explore, what it means to literally be out there in the multiple dimensions and a life that has new dimensions that are beyond that, which is the, 3D, 2D linearity. Where are you along the lines of the use of some of the more exquisite psychedelic plant allies or for LSD or MDMA or any of the things that have arisen in our lifetime? Stanislav Grof moving forward, who are you along that argument or that line?
Yeah, well, again, being a guy that played lead guitar in a rock band back in my college days in the late 60s and early 70s, you can imagine I have experimented a bit back in those days. And I think they do give you in other words, the plant world is an amazing world. And it gives us all sorts of capabilities. So does the animal world, does that matter? But we have a drugstore called Planet Earth. And it allows us to do many things. As a matter of fact, studying ancient man, you can find out a lot. And I've been to China and other places, and, there's herbs and things that they've been using for thousands of years and actually do something. So to deny that none of that will do anything is crazy. So I think it's worth doing a little experimenting. But at the same time, what I've discovered over time in my years and decades of being on the planet is that there's a lot that you can explore, a lot more that you can explore if you allow your mind to open in ways that maybe you're not currently opening it. In other words, back in the early 70s, very early 70s, I got into superconscious meditation. There was a guy named Swami Rama who was one of the high swamis from India, and I was in Milwaukee area at the time, and he was visiting the Western world, happened to just come to the hospitals here in Milwaukee to show the Western world the power of meditation. And what he did was, and I still have the article on it, they hooked him up at Children's Hospital, actually. It's still a hospital near here. And he was able to, or near my place in Milwaukee, so he was able to they put a probe here and a probe here, and he was able to change the temperature of the two sides of his hand through meditation. He would bring them down, he could lower them, he could raise them just through meditation, and they could measure that by several degrees. He actually was able to stop his heart through meditation, actually stopped it and then restarted again just by thinking about it. In other words, that's kind of empirical in my mind. And there were doctors that were reporting this, not him. So he offered a class in superconscious meditation out in a beautiful part of Wisconsin called Spring Green for a period of time. And I decided to take that. So I early got into an inner journey as well. And I got into the power of meditation and the superconsciousness, unlike the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, I would define as when you're plugged into all consciousness, everything. In other words, we're all brothers and sisters on this planet, and I believe that we're all born connected. The problem is the more we disconnect from each other, the more disharmony we get. And if we get disconnected far enough, we have war and people shooting each other. The more connected we are, the less of that we have. I think we start out connected and somehow we start growing apart. And I think the more we can bring ourselves back together and find a commonality, the better off we'll all be. And part of that is realizing not just the connection of other souls. I mean, let's say, face it, a captain doesn't say how many egos are on board, and a captain doesn't say how many bodies are on board. There's a reason for that. He says how many souls are on board. And, there's a difference. That, by the way, the other two can get you into trouble compared to the one I just mentioned. So if we start thinking about things in a little different way, and we realize what can get us into trouble, our ego and our body gets us into trouble, but maybe not our soul if we can develop it. And if we think back and I look out at the solar system at night, which I'll do at some point tonight, and just look up at the infinity up there and let myself go into that, that's a pretty good psychedelic if you really get into it. Especially if that's one of the reasons I actually do like science. It's one of the reasons I taught science subjects, because the more I learn, the more there is to learn, and the more amazing beauty there is that is not only undiscovered, but there is to see and discover. There's the macro world, Jupiter. Wow. But then there's the micro world, and that's the molecules and the electrons. And even smaller than that. It's interesting that they all spin around each other, though, whether it's a giant solar system or it's just an electron going around a proton. They're all kind of doing the same thing, and I like to think about, wow, hey, that's kind of cool. Let's think about the dimensionality of that. Well, man, I don't need a drug to do that to get really high. I can just really think about the science of those things and how the giant is connected to the ultra small. Holy cow, that's a pretty cool evening. So I kind of have cool evenings doing that kind of thing nowadays.
I'm glad that we went down this road, because this really speaks to something that I think is a very important part of who you are and how you show up in the world, Daniel, and what you are teaching. And everything that I've heard, every interaction that I've had with you thus far is there's a place of childlike wonder that you seem to consistently maintain. And as you speak, I can feel that same childlike wonder inside of myself. I feel inspired by it. I feel like there's a remembering that's occurring inside of myself.
To hear you say that.
Yeah. And I like to orient that way as well. And I had just sort of had this sort of hypothesis that I'm working with here that as you're speaking around the relationship between childlike wonder and something that we get conditioned around as adults. And that is this notion of optimism. It's like optimism is almost like it seems, and, I'm just kind of exploring this as a thought for the first time, so you can reflect off of this yourself. It seems like optimism is almost this sort of memory of childlike wonder, which has been reduced down to something that is this sort of distant memory of a very real experience, of a much more broad spectrum, multidimensional experience that is childlike wonder. And then as we grow as adults, the best we can get to is optimism or hope. This feeling of, I think something might be better down the road there. And I haven't actually heard you even use the word optimism as you've spoken. It has not come up once. And part of why I think it hasn't come up is because there's a certain inefficiency to optimism if it's blind optimism. Whereas part of what you are communicating is you can identify if you stay open and you stay in that childlike wonder space and you are able to take in all of these multiple ways of thinking about a subject, you're able to create enough certainties that you don't even really need the optimism. The optimism is just, it would be unnecessary because instead you are replacing it with strategy, with looking at, hey, this is an optimistic direction because it's pretty sure that these trends are going to continue in this direction, and that will lead to good results. So anyway.
My thought on that, I love that. I think optimism is kind of like success. It's a result versus, the goal. You have to, and blind optimism, meaning I want you to have hope. But as I told Ted, that student, when he was trying to start a business and wasn't getting any customers, I said, hope is not a strategy, because he kept saying, I hope I get some customers. And I said, well, maybe you ought to try to get some customers. So, by the way, I'm very optimistic. First of all, pessimists, they never do anything because they know it'll fail. So there you go, right there. Mm-hmm. Secondly, I've got every reason in the world to be optimistic. I travel around the world. I meet most people on the planet, and I've been blessed to be, I'm a 2 million miler on 3 airlines. So in other words, that's 6 million. And that's just those 3 airlines, not all the other ones I flew. I've given over 3,000 keynote speeches around the world, all over the place. I do consulting. It's a beautiful planet. I did want to see it, and I've seen a lot of it. A lot to see yet. I wanted to visit my fellow brothers and sisters and help them out if I could. And I've done a lot of that. Here's what I've learned. Most people on the planet are really good people. Now, leaders can lead them astray. Governments can lead them astray, but the core is not evil. Most people are really good people. To see that, that's the majority. And so it's really just kind of helping empower. Secondly, there's a lot of bright bulbs around. Every now and then you meet people that are kind of a dim bulb, but most people there's a lot of bright young bulbs all over the place and a lot of bright old bulbs. We need them all. And they're focused on creating a better tomorrow rather than waiting to see. And I worry about waiting to see. Frankly, predicting the future, if that's all I did, I would have stopped 38 years ago. What I'm interested in doing is empowering people to actively shape a better future for themselves or for others. I want you to shape the future rather than passively receive it. But I need some methodology to give you the confidence to even do that. I need some logic to get you to even embrace it. And I need some ways to get you to look first binarily. It's walk before you run, before you can start getting into that next level. And again, there's I try to give some tools and some help. I mean, there's a lot of things I'm bad at, and got a long list of things I'm terrible at. But I got a list of a few things I'm good at, and I try to get better at those. And one other little thought, and just comes to mind, but I can't help myself. I'll use it as another teaching moment. And that is that everyone listening to this has multiple talents. And the two of you have multiple talents, and you could give me a list just like that. And you're very talented. And we can make living off our talents. Actually, we're talented. We're good at it. It's kind of fun. But when you're in the talent zone, you can only get so good, and then you start leveling off. And you're not growing like you did. You're just kind of getting up there. And by the way, if you're sick today, we'll get someone else with a talent like yours. But for those of us that have discovered our gift, which is different than a talent, which is more unique to you, a gift lets you learn and grow every year. You can be 90 years old and still growing the gift and how you can use the gift, especially if you're thinking abundance and if you're thinking some of the other things that I talked about. So the problem is, talents can often keep us from even discovering what our gift is.
Oh, and there you go. That's a powerful one right there.
Talents can keep us from discovering our gifts. By the way, how did I learn that? I did that. When I started those other companies, I was starting to use talents, and I was seduced by them. Why? I was good at it.
That's a powerful one.
I was straying from my gift, why I'm here, why I was put on the planet. And so they can keep you from discovering it. So when you can really define your gift, then, and by the way, you can't find it by looking out. That's where most of us look for things. Unfortunately, this is different. You got to look inside. And when you can find what that gift is, that thing that is unique to you, what will happen is you can direct then the talents to support the gift. And the talents become the thermal that allows you to soar without flapping your wings.
It's not putting the cart before the horse.
Right. So part of, I believe, life's journey is to define and discover the gift. And most of us may have trouble right now. Maybe you can't spill it out right now if you're listening to this. That's okay. No matter what age you are, you do have it. By the way, you all have a gift. You all have a unique gift. Guarantee it. You all have a unique gift. The key is taking a little time to think about it. And I can remember trying to self-explore this with myself long ago and thinking, boy, I'm really close now. I can almost reach out and touch it. I mean, I remember even seeing that metaphor in my mind. I can almost get there, but I'm not quite there. But see, I kept reaching, trying to figure it out. And I think for me, it's turning light bulbs on in people's heads. And if I can turn a light bulb on in people's heads, then, and I'm using my gift. So I'm a talented writer. I don't think I'm a gifted writer, but yet I've had best-selling books, New York Times, Wall Street Journal. See, what I do is, if my writing, which I'm talented at, is lighting light bulbs, I am probably not the world's best speaker, but, the last time I was in Beijing, I had 14,000 people in my audience. What did I do? I was lighting light bulbs. Yeah. So if I'm using the talents to support the gifts, and I can soar, and then I can do what I was put on the planet to do.
It's a really beautiful interface that's consistent or resonant with this idea of success versus significance, me versus them, this idea of if I have a talent, that's really me. I'm really still focused on me. If I'm a great piano player or I'm a great mathematician, I am that. If in fact I'm lighting light bulbs because of who I have as a capacity of my gift to be a mathematician or a gift to be a piano player, and I'm actually lighting light bulbs on someone else, making myself significant as a contribution, it is there that the real gift of life lies, is kind of what I hear you saying, that there's an emptiness pointing at me, but there's not an emptiness if what I'm doing is making an impact on others to better their lives.
Yeah, I was on an airplane riding with the guy sitting next to me was the bass player for Yo-Yo Ma, and the cello player. And he was fascinating. He was from China. His bass, which is a string bass, of course, had been passed down through generations. He told me about it all. And as we were talking, I told him that I also am a musician and play and have performed in front of audiences, but my big audiences are speaking. That's, speaking is what I do. He's playing an instrument. So I said, I believe I'm working on a quest to get better every day, every month, every year, because I know there's an endless up to getting better. And he said, yeah, me too. And I said, I think getting better is the exact same thing for both of us, even though I'm speaking and you're playing an instrument. And he said, well, what is it? And I said, I think both of us are trying to find ways of more deeply reaching out into the heart and the soul of the people that we're communicating to or playing to or interfacing with or doing whatever it is to touch them in a more deeper way. And that's what getting better really is. And he thought about it for a minute and he agreed. And I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying that was a conversation I had with him, and it's a way to think about it.
It is. Wow. Well, I don't know if I'm cleansed or exhausted or blown away or grounded. I'm not sure. It's some sort of combination of like cleansed, exhausted, blown away, grounded, curious, interested, and moved. Sam, where are you at the end of this conversation?
Oh, man, I could keep going for hours. This is just phenomenal. The warmth and authenticity that you bring and the curiosity, Daniel, is truly inspiring. I mean, you are doing your job. You are doing your gift so well. Just in this conversation, I'm being so impacted. You're like the antidote to cynicism.
Very good. Very good.
I really appreciate that's my biggest enemy, my personal enemy, is the tendency towards cynicism. That's my shadow that I have to contend with, and so I very much appreciate your contribution to this conversation and to the world that you're making, because it really is truly uplifting.
Well, thank you both for giving me the opportunity. And this, again, I've got to know Sam on a phone call a few times, and I already know I want to get to know Dr. Fred better because he's got me real interested in his world just through our conversations as well. So I know this won't be our last interface, either in a podcast or in others. Love to come back someday as well.
Absolutely.
But let me just give everyone a thought, something to consider doing. And that is, I'd like you to consider spending 1 hour a week unplugging from the present and plugging into your future, because that's where you're going to spend the rest of your life. Maybe you ought to think about it. Remember, this is about elevating your future. Instead of having a list of things that you don't know, what are the things that you do know? Instead of having a list of things that you can't do, what are the things that you can do? Instead of having a list of things that you can't influence, what are the things that you can influence? And when you start getting that kind of a list together, and by the way, you'll find what are the hard trends, those future facts, those things that you can see that you know will happen, and what's the opportunity for you to elevate yourself and others around you. You'll get a list. You'll start getting a list. And what I would advise you to do is forget the could do's and the should do's. You're too busy for that. But if you can find one that you determine is a must do and you do it, you'll be moving forward in a way that you never did before.
Beautiful. What a great recommendation. I just totally love it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I don't have much more to say other than, thank you. It's just an honor. It was part of the deal with podcasting and then podcasting with someone with the gravitas of Sam Morris is that I get an opportunity to meet some of the more spectacular people in the world. And certainly it's been that for me today with you. And I'm so happy that we get to share this with listeners. Of course, given the possibility that someday this stuff will be published. And in the meantime, it's really just been a thrill to be with you. I went to Northwestern University in Chicago, Illinois, and 60 people from my class were from Wisconsin. So I have a little 60 people in my 162 number class were cheeseheads. And so I have a little bit of Packers, a little bit of Door County, a little bit of La Crosse, a little bit of Madison, a little bit of Beloit, a little bit of, LeClaire, and
the places, you're just checking them right off.
I just check them right off. And even up in the A country, up in the, where the biggest and most important word is A, I'm up there, and in the, Canadian border side. And so it's a pleasure being with you, and really the homeliness that you are, the steadiness that you are, the whimsical nature that you are, the childhood, curiosity that Sam pointed to is refreshing more than anything, because I think we're all really struggling with the threat of having boredom and cynicism just lock us up, just lock our shit up forever. And who you are is a beacon in that, a beacon of hope, a beacon of faith, a beacon of a future, that really allows for us to not have to go in that direction. My goodness, that's turning on some light bulbs over here. So thank you for being you, really.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Really
Pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you again at some point. And by the way, as a side note, and you may turn off the podcast now or keep it going or whatever, but when you're ready to launch and get things out there, let me know so I can help you guys get some word out.
Well, you can do that, and we'll talk to you afterwards. I have some ideas for you instantly, but let's get this show off and running, and it's super awesome. Sam, as always, you're just beautiful and lovely and fun to work with. Thanks for being here, and thanks for inviting Mr. Burrus to be with us. Really
thank you. Thank you, Daniel. Amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
Off we go. Insanity, Sam. That's what this shit is. It's insanity. That's what this is. Welcome to Insanity. Bye for now, guys.
So how about that? What did you think of that, Fred?
Dude, I am just blown away. These guys' brilliance is like steamrolling. I'm like, I was working really hard to find a space where I could kind of jab him or nudge him or make fun of him or something. This guy is like too good, too Wisconsin, too clean, too right, you know? He's got too much shit going on. He's too protected.
He needs to spend more time.
One of the most, what's that?
And he needs to spend more time in LA or New York to get a little jaded.
I think so. This
become kind of cynical
stuff. I should know, Sam. I went to
that eternal optimism is pretty impressive, though.
Right, it really is. And for a self-proclaimed futurist, as if it's accurate, it looks like the world's on its way to, good things, Sam. It's really great. Like
everything's just beautiful from here on out. I'm just going to trust you. Everything's just beautiful from here on out. We're good now.
Yeah, we should be fine now. Thanks for meeting us, Mr. Burrus. And so, Sam, it's really fun to have this. What should we tell our listeners? I think there's a matter of, if you really like the conversations we have, go ahead and, hit like and then leave a comment, like leave a review, and maybe even subscribe to our channel. What do you think?
Absolutely. Check it out. Hit like, leave a review, do all those good things that you're supposed to do.
Yeah, that's what's going to allow us to even interview smarter people, as if there are smarter people than Daniel Burrus.
No, it doesn't get any smarter than that. It's a downhill slide from now.
All right.
But yeah, share this, guys. We appreciate it.
Yep, we really do. Thanks for staying on. Thanks for being with me, Sam. And y'all, we'll catch you on the flip side. Bye for now.